love is in the air. Jacques and I had been seeing each other for a little over 3 months when he took me to the theater. All of the orchestra-level seats, as well as those in the mezzanine, were completely sold out, so we had to settle for the balcony. "How lowly," I said after the pimply-faced usher had shown us to our seats. "I can't believe we're sitting in the balcony."
"Don't be a snob,"
Jacques replied.
"There's nothing wrong with sitting in the balcony."
"They pee on the seats in the balcony," I said. "People are unrefined." Jacques shot me a look, clearly not as amused by my little joke as I was. The truth of the matter is, my disdain for sitting in the balcony had less to do with refinement and more to do with my irrational fear of heights. Nightmarish visions of a violent 10.0 earthquake striking San Francisco and me plummeting 4 stories to my death flashed through my mind. After settling into our seats, I began paging through the show's program in a feeble effort to distract myself from these terrifying thoughts, as well as the dizzying sensation I felt every time I peered down at the stage and realized that the only thing separating me from it was a little brass railing and a whole lot of open air. I felt my armpits juice up as I located the nearest emergency exit. "This is kind of scary," I said to Jacques.
"Oh, just don't look down,"
he replied. "How can I not look down when the stage is down?" Just then, the house lights dimmed and the orchestra erupted into the show's overture. Aside from my slight case of vertigo, everything was going just fine at first, until about 5 minutes into the play, when my nostrils were suddenly assaulted not by a smell, but by a stench. It was like 10,000 eggs boiled in a homeless man's bathwater. Someone passed gas. It was the kind my friends and I would have called silent but violent when we were kids. Unheard but certainly not unnoticed. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most offensive, it was a solid 8, maybe even a 9. Now, I'm pretty sure that most people would agree that public flatulence is impolite, especially when you're someplace cultural, like the theater. The only place more impolite would be at a restaurant where people are eating, or maybe on an elevator where they can't escape. I mean, even Benjamin Franklin wrote about it once. He said, and I quote, "It is universally well known that in digesting our common food, there is created or produced in the bowels of human creatures a great quantity of wind, that the permitting this air to escape and mix with the atmosphere is usually offensive to the company from the fetid smell that accompanies it, that all well-bred people, therefore, to avoid giving such offense, forcibly restrain the efforts of nature to discharge that wind." Of course, it's also impolite to take notice when another individual passes gas. A faux pas to the faux pas, if you will. So while my immediate instinct was to leap up from my seat and holler, "Who farted?" then dramatically cup my hand over my nose and mouth to cover the smell, I refrained. Instead, I quietly held my breath until the air had cleared. But just when I thought it was safe to breathe again, it happened a second time. Another back-end blowout. Only this one was even more rancid than the last. A definite 11. Still, I exercised self-control by holding my breath and pretending not to notice, then surveyed the people around me to see if I could determine who the offender might be. Was it the middle-aged woman sitting to my right, or the older couple a few seats down? Could it be one of the 4 younger women sitting in the row directly in front of me, or the balding gentleman seated in the row directly in front of them? Of course, it was impossible to tell. That's part of what makes passing gas in public so offensive, that it's an anonymous assault on innocent victims. Now, by this point, it was a good 15 minutes or so into the play, and I hadn't the slightest idea of what was happening on stage because I'd been so distracted, first by the vertigo, then by the Windenladen. And then, just as I was starting to get back into the performance, it happened a 3rd time, and this one was almost palpable. I felt the temperature around me rise. The air felt thicker. I almost tasted it. Oh my God, I thought. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. The group of young women in front of me all turned and whispered to one another, then covered their noses. Just then Jacques leaned over and whispered, "Is that you?" "What? Me?" I whispered back, offended that he would assume so, but also slightly horrified. We had only been dating for 3.5 months after all, and had yet to reach that stage in our relationship where we were comfortable discussing our bodily functions together, let alone performing them in front of one another. "I can't believe you think I—" "Shh!" a woman shushed from a few seats over. I felt my cheeks flush red with embarrassment as I sunk down in my chair, silently wishing death upon whoever kept breaking wind. Now, in addition to ruining my theater-going experience, they were imposing imposing upon my relationship, forcing my new boyfriend and I to confront a reality about one another that neither of us were ready yet to address. The aerial assaults continued all through Act 1 at about 5-minute intervals. At some point I finally threw politeness to the wind, no pun intended, and pulled my shirt over my nose, using it as an impromptu surgical mask to shield myself from the smell. And I wasn't the only one. Pretty much everyone within a 10-foot radius was doing the same. By the time intermission rolled around, I felt as though the vapors had been absorbed into my body through the pores on my face, and I couldn't wait to get outside for a little fresh air. I feel like I just spent the past hour and a half in a gas chamber waiting to die, I said to Jacques outside in the lobby. Do you even know what's happening in this play? Jacques shook his head and told me he hadn't been able to focus either. This is exactly why I don't sit in the balcony, I said. The lobby lights flickered and we reluctantly made our way back into the theater. At this point I should note that the 4 women who'd previously been sitting in front of me all left. Their seats now sat vacant. Apparently they were so offended by the stale winds of Act 1 that they weren't willing to stick around and smell what Act 2 might have in store. The house lights went down, the stage lights came up, and not 1 minute into Act 2, the offender struck again. And then again, and then again, and then again. A little over an hour later, the moment the curtain finally dropped, everyone around me leapt up from their seats and bolted for the exit. Let's go, I said to Jacques, grabbing him by the wrist. I need a neti pot, a hot shower, and a full-body chemical peel after that. My God! Though we ultimately survived that night, Jacques and I didn't go back to the theater again for almost a year. Not until a traveling Broadway production he wanted to see came through San Francisco.
Hey, should I get us tickets?
He asked. I thought about it for a moment, remembering back to the first disastrous time we had attended the theater together, then said, fine. But this time, I refuse to sit in the fucking balcony.